I have another trinomial that I need to factor. Notice the three terms. So we're going to, again, use the handout that's available for you, the factoring trinomials method that uses the factor by grouping. This method first says for me to rearrange, if I need to, my terms. This problem is already organized the way I need it to be because I have my x squared term first, and then my x, and then my whole number constant at the end. So the next thing I need to do is to identify my A, my B, and my C. And A is going to be the 6. B, notice the B here is negative 23 because the sign in front of the number goes with the coefficient. And my C is going to be a positive 15. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together to give me the value of whatever A times C is. In this case, A is 6 and C is 15. So 6 times 15 is 90. So I need two numbers that multiply together to give me 90. But when I add together those two numbers, they give me a negative 23. So I need to look and see how I can get values that multiply together to give me 90. Well, that would be 1 and 90, 2 and 45, 3 and 30, 5 and 18, 6 and 15, 9 and 10. But how am I going to add those two numbers together to get a negative number? Well, the two numbers would have to both be negative, because if I had a negative 90 and a negative 1, if both numbers were negative, they would multiply together to give me a positive value. However, it's easy to see that those are not going to add together to be negative 23. So it's actually these two terms here that I need. Because if I had a negative 5 times a negative 18, they would multiply together to give me a positive 90. But when I add together negative 5 plus a negative 18, I get the negative 23 that I'm looking for. So I found the two numbers, the negative 5 and the negative 18. So I use those two numbers now to rewrite my original trinomial. I leave the first term alone, which was 6x squared. I leave my last term alone, which was a plus 15. But my middle term, I'm going to rewrite using a negative 5 and a negative 18 as coefficients on the variable x. Check to make sure that you didn't change the value of your problem. Negative 5x minus 18x would combine to be a negative 23x. So now I'm ready to factor by grouping. I'm going to look at the first two terms and take out what they have in common, which is the x, leaving me with a 6x minus 5. Now looking at my last two terms, I need to be able to get the 6x minus 5. So I know that 18 and 15 both have a 3 in common, but in order to get the positive 6 and the minus 5, I need to take out a negative 3, because that would give me a negative 18x and a plus 15 if I multiplied it out. So now, one more step and I have the answer. 6x minus 5 can be taken out to leave with the x and the minus 3. Now remember, I can multiply those two binomials together, and I would end up with the original problem of 6x squared minus 23x minus 15. Let's look at one more problem. Let's look at one that is a little more complicated with its variables. 3x squared y squared minus 14xy plus 15. The nice thing about this factoring trinomials method is that the method remains the same no matter how complicated your variables or your numbers turn out to be. When we look at this problem and we try to find the a, b, and c, they're still in the same places. A is the number that's in front of your squared terms. B is in front of your terms that are not squared. And C is your whole number. So A is 3, B is negative 14, and C is 15. So the method remains the same. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together to give me A times C, which is 3 times 15 or 45. But I want those numbers to add together to give me B, which is a negative 14. So they have to add together to give me negative 14. They have to multiply together to give me 45. What numbers multiply together to give me 45? Well, 1 times 45, 3 times 15, 5 times 9. How would I be able to add those together to get a negative number? Well, both of the numbers would have to be negative. Negative 5 times negative 9 would give me a positive 45, but when I added them together, negative 5 plus a negative 9 would add together to give me a negative 14. So I found the two terms that I needed. What do I do with those two terms? I rewrite my problem. I leave the first term alone. The 3x squared y squared stays the same. I leave my last term alone, the plus 15. I use the negative 5 and the negative 9 as coefficients of my middle term. Pay attention to the variable of your middle term. The middle term is an xy. All I'm going to change is the coefficients. Instead of a negative 14 xy, I'm going to have a negative 5 and a negative 9 xy. Minus 5xy minus 9xy. So now I have the four-term problem that I'm going to factor by grouping. So I'm going to look at the first two terms and take out what they have in common, which in this case is going to be the x and the y. So I'm left with 3xy minus 5. My last two terms here, I'm going to try to get the same 3xy minus 5. So what I need to do is take out a negative 3 in order to make that a negative 9 and a plus 15. So my answer is 3xy minus 5 and xy minus 3.